Hello everyone, is everyone still awake? Or after lunch? Well, that's a bit of a worry. Right, Joyce's a wise old uncle said to me many years ago as I was a little kid, find something you enjoy and make a career of it.
Right, this wasn't on. There you are.
I thought that was a pretty good idea. Soil biology chose me. It just took me a few decades to wake up. I'm going to put a few notes on important things to me, but I did the usual thing. After year 10, went to ag college, studied ag, taught me a few useful things, plus how to play rugby, drink beer. My current business partner believes if you don't drink, you can't think. So I arrived home onto the family farm in 1970, drought, depression, things are a bit ordinary. 18 months later, my father died when I was 19, at 64, short round of a brain tumour. My brother, mother, two younger brothers and I chose to manage the family farm ourselves so that we could make mistakes rather than have a manager bury them, and we'd learn from them. This is my mother's favourite saying, it's not your attitude, it's your attitude, not your aptitude, that determines your altitude in life. After the Second World War, General MacArthur took a bloke called Ed Drucker from Detroit and took him to Japan to rebuild Japan so they didn't have to fight the Japanese 25 years later like they did after the Germans after the First World War. And this bloke taught the Japanese this principle called Kaizen, which is never-ending search for doing better or improving. So I'm going to write a few notes, choices, attitudes and goals, because we started doing some goals, we made goals and plans, and we had some wins and losses, expanded our business, wanted to expand our business so all three of us, plus Mum, could retire. Found some suitable mentors. We started doing some interesting things. That sandhill country with the cypress pines, we found a way to change the Aristoida, the wiregrass that was on those sandhills, into a C4 grass, buffel grass. It made that highly unproductive country into incredibly productive, probably better than our black soil country, by just opening it up, getting some productive species in there. Along the way we found out that Aristoida, the wiregrass, is 3 or 4 times less efficient, water use efficiency-wise, than the C4 grasses. We started focusing on profit. We had to make a bit of money if we were going to grow things. And we'd learned a bit about water infiltration from the trees and the effect of keeping the wind off the ground. We started doing education. My brothers are at, one did ag economics, the other one did Marcus Oldham. And we, along the way, decided that we would embrace the mantra of get big or get out. So we bought an old Cat D8 and a lot of gear and expanded 200 acres of fodder cropping to 6 years later to, in 3 years we went to 5,000 acres of cropping. Grew some good crops and we were cruising along pretty well, so we bought another property. Good move. We have a bit of a timing issue in our family. Every time we buy a place we get a drought. That didn't work all that well. So we had to add on the list, have a plan B. Sold that place, survived, got a few good prices, cruised along pretty well. We started realising, because we're in a very marginal cropping area, where we had to save all the summer rainfall for the winter. 70% summer, 30% winter rainfall. So we started thinking we needed to start to get into zero till, this in the early 80s. So we bought a little spray rig and started experimenting. So I'm going to add on there, experiment mindfully, scale up fast. So we, over a couple of years, started to learn a bit about zero till and chemical farming. And then we were full on zero till by about that stage. We'd bought more land, we're up to 7,000 or 8,000 acres at that point in time. Some interesting things happening. We started saving more water, improving our water use efficiency, but we were spending 100 grand a year on chemicals in the summer before we even had a chance of growing a crop. And there was a major moment in my life anyway when I carried out in my arms 56 grand's worth of glean. And that glean, I could put the amount of glean on my thumb, 15 grams or something, that would kill saltbush for 6 or 7 years. You know, horrific stuff. But the stubble was getting very hard to break down. Suddenly it was going back to using fire to burn all the stubble and all that sort of thing. But everyone told us, all the experts, we were starting to get a few agronomists around there, and they started saying to us, you can't put any livestock in the system. We thought we needed just some stock in the system. So we started trusting our own intuition. And we started realising about that time that we are the land steward or custodian. We're only looking after it for the next generation. But we started trusting and learning and taking decisions ourselves rather than handing those decisions on to other people. We were cruising along pretty nicely in the zero-till business, and we went to an RCS school and did the same sort of things that Ben was talking about. Massive game changer, learned about business principles. They're absolutely invaluable and still using it to this day. But 1990 brought a business disaster that some of you older ones will remember. When we planted the crop, it was going to yield us about 140 a tonne, maybe 145 a tonne farm gate. Harvest return $56.20. By that stage, we'd bought another big place. We had a 5-year drought, interest rates of 15-20%, sheep and wool price crash. A few more lessons. Haven't used a marketing plan. We sold some land, survived, big debt. We went from debt-free to, or from a huge debt to a debt-free in 1 year with a big crop in 96. Because we went over to organic. We were initially going to sell to Uncle Toby's, organic Vitabrits. Then we moved on to selling it in 9 different European destinations. Our first European grain went to feed fish in Norway. Beautiful 14% prime hard wheat feeding fish where they wanted 10% protein. But they paid the money. We sold wheat into Switzerland extremely well through those years. Around about that stage, we were just starting to think this soil biology stuff might be worth looking at because we were not saving as much water as we should. So I went off to an Arden Anderson school, learnt a little bit about biology, and we put some inoculant on our seed in about 89. And this amazing thing happened. I had a hell of an experience through that period. I was blocked the auger up 2 or 3 times and running on very short sleep, winding with a pair of Stilsons and auger over to clean out 40 feet of bloody wet grain. Wasn't a lot of joy. But we put secondary roots down. We often grew a crop, 1 or 2 years in 5, we'd grow a crop on hair roots because we were growing from stored moisture. The secondary roots made a huge difference. Suddenly I went looking for secondary roots. That's what we need to have, a bit of a wake up. Soil biology focus. Around about that stage, we decided we needed to have a move to the city so our 2 girls could go to school from home rather than go off to boarding school. Difficult environment in the local school, so we sold our property at St George. We had a lot of options, but we sold the property at St George. We had lots of opportunities in there. There was 100,000 people within a 100k radius, so lots of meat marketing opportunities. New property was 1/10 of the size, grazing, well developed, double the rainfall, half the evaporation, half the distance to the city. What could go wrong? We knew a fair bit, pretty smart. So that was just a look at seed, but you can see secondary roots just poking around. Look at the area. That's 33 days post-planting. That's at Mount Gambier. What we learnt when we went to this new place, it had been farmed and mined for 150 years. Absolutely mined. Small place, close to town. We threw everything at that place. 7 tonnes to the hectare, 4,200 tonnes of compost, hydrated lime, multi-species crops, planned grazing. Nothing worked. It took us 9 years to turn it around. I'm just going to get into Cole's area for a little bit, and I'm going to show a few pictures of one of the lessons we learnt. The thing we learnt about multi-species plantings and pasture cropping, and this was done in 2016. On the left after some big frosts in July, on the right in September. So it wasn't working very well. We had a few problems. We've got that right where we are at Mount Gambier. We've got it working fairly well nowadays, but still in the learning process. Along the way, we discovered ultra-high density grazing, and that we had a huge black oats crop turn up after that multi-species failed cropping episode. We had a crop of black oats turn up. Don't know where the seed turned up. There was always a bit of black oats, but it just turned up. It was that high. It was up around my waist, riding a horse, trying to get cattle out of a paddock. The dogs are following the bloody horse. They weren't out in front. We used high density stocking numbers to flatten that, pretty much what Ben showed. That's what came up afterwards. And we started to see some peas from our multi-species cropping that went into that country. Didn't see too much of the plants that survived, but suddenly after that mulch, up they came. I want to talk a little bit about water. We're in a dry climate, dry environment. We waste so much water. I've seen wasted water all over the world. And this was early one morning in 2016. I didn't measure the rain. I had to go to town early in the morning. Drove in. It had been raining all night. Didn't know how much it was. Water over the road. Sheep in water. Came home and went for a look around. And the dam at the bottom of the place, there was no water lying in our place. There was another 100 mils before we started to run water off, and the water running off the place was clear as clear. So we stored a megalitre per hectare into the ground. That went into the ground before any water ran off. My bride and I, my bride got sick of me after 30 years of marriage, and so we split the sheets, sold the property. I've travelled extensively all over different parts of Europe and the world, and ridden a push bike in some crazy places, and started working around, spending time on Soils for Life places around Australia. And I spent some time at the Haggerty's place, made a bit of compost with them. You can read the story, give you a moment there, but that was an eye-opener for me, absolute eye-opener. Since early 2020, I've come to Mount Gambier. COVID chased me there, and I'm working with an organic dairy farmer nowadays. We're growing multi-species crops and trying to grow grain crops. We're very successful at growing multi-species. That's our extract maker. We use the BD flow form to, and that's the basis of all our organic biodynamic sprays, but the flow form, don't know what it does, don't need to know what it does, but it drops the pH of the water from 7.9 down to about 7.2. We're growing some very good multi-species crops. There's no artificial nitrogen or anything been put on any of that country over the years. So what we've learnt is that it is possible to grow similar or more quality and quantity pastures without artificial inputs. Despite what Mark said this morning, it's been 8 years without any nitrogen inputs, and we had a problem with ammonia a couple of years ago. There was too much ammonia. It was being held up by the lack of manganese in the soil. Same sort of thing we picked up, as Tom was talking about, with the sap testing. We've got that through, and things are ticking along quite well. We're getting really good value out of these multi-species pastures that have been hanging around for years, quite effectively, 5, 6 years. We're using a natural intelligence farming question-based decision process, working very well for us. Jane Slattery's up the back there. Where's your hand, Jane? Put your hand up. The Haggerty's use, as I'm sure you saw in that other thing, Jane's been instrumental in working with them to get the system working. But it's all about getting yourself mentally balanced. Before you can heal your land, you've got to heal yourself. Learning to trust your own intuition, questioning why, and questioning why will help you find the how to. SAP tests. 5 Principles of Soil Health from Gabe Brown. You can read that. I've added onto that, do no harm to the soil. You don't need to put a fungicide or seed dressing on your seed. If you want to step into this direction, the first thing you do is inoculate your seed with something healthy rather than it's going to start to kill the soil biota. That's my summary. It's interesting. The only thing I didn't put on there is education. You need to spend time to educate yourself. There's a huge amount of resources on these bloody phones we've all got in our pockets. There's a huge amount of information. I listened to 3 podcasts of John Kempf on the way over to here from Mount Gambier yesterday. There's wonderful YouTube resources, huge amount of information. You're a fool if you don't use it. Find a good mentor, not a snake oil salesman. And it was interesting that we started the day with the Haggerty. Is that the right way of saying it? How do you say it there? Sorry? Haggerty. With the Haggerty men who said the same line: healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy animals, healthy people. Thank you.